What's the wildest cheating story you've heard? Story 1. I knew a guy years ago who was a private investigator. Many times he was approached by a spouse who suspected their partner was cheating. He had a slam dunk strategy. He would suggest his client sign up for a course, whether a hobby thing or educational. The key was that the class would happen for a period of weeks, all on the same day of the week, and all at the same time of day. Then, while his client was in class, he would follow the spouse. Caught them every time. I always thought that it would probably be much more lucrative to be a PI who just blackmails the cheating spouse once they find proof. Kind of a, I can either work for you or your spouse, and I'm going with whoever pays me the most. That's a short-term money-making idea that will kill your career long-term though. Most clients for PIs are insurance companies and legal firms, and if you get caught blackmailing who you are following while not giving correct data to your employer, they will sue you for not fulfilling your contract and companies will blacklist you from working with them. Okay, I'll just stick to owning a tire shop and throwing nails into the road. Story 2. My friend's mom was in a relationship with a guy for years, and they ended up getting engaged and due to marry. The guy was a senior director of a company for which he traveled every week abroad for business. Eventually, the guy had a heart attack, and when my friend's mom turned up at the hospital, his wife and 2 kids were there also. Turned out he was already married with children and living a double life the whole time. When he went abroad for business, he was simply going back to his actual family. My dad did this. He worked nights and would juggle both families that way. He came clean after he got admitted to the hospital for heart trouble and realized that if things went badly, he'd end up in this exact situation. I was 16 when he came clean that I have an older brother and sister. They found out about me then too, as did his wife. ETA, I'd actually already figured it out before he told me though. Nobody else had. EATA, I saw a preview of a text on my dad's phone from my sister. I didn't know she was my sister obviously, but it said, "Hi dad, mom says ... At first, I was in denial and thought his friend must have borrowed his phone or something. I started to watch him more closely. He had a ringtone, LOL, the 2000s, that would say the name of the caller. I noticed whenever a certain name rang, he'd leave the room. Some tactical eavesdropping later, and 15-year-old me had it figured out that I had a brother and sister. I didn't know I had a stepmother though, or that I was family number 2 and they were his primary family, but I still think I did pretty well. My whole family on my mom's side knew. Mom respected that it was my dad's secret to tell and she gave him time to tell it, although they did have a few arguments about it as I was growing up. I never knew what they were about at the time. It's wild how someone can get engaged without even knowing who the other person is living with. That said, my ex insisted on living with me way past the breakup. Separate bedrooms, thank God. We'd bought a house together and he was stalling every way he could about figuring out an equitable house split. He got engaged to his new girlfriend after dating her only 6 months, and even told me he wanted to keep living in the house past their wedding date. He wasn't trying to move her in, he was just fine not living with her anytime soon. I have no idea how she was okay with it. She knew we had dated and were still living together. I knew he and I were fully over and wanted nothing to do with him, but why the hell was she buying anything he was selling in that situation? I can't fathom. I hope they never had dinner together. Talk about awkwardness. Story 3. My ex-wife pretended to be admitted to a mental health ward for a long-time treatment, while actually staying with her new man and cheating on me. My mother convinced my dad that they should both admit themselves to get treatment for substance abuse, although my dad barely used it and she was a full-blown addict. They went to the facility and he was checked in first. As soon as he was out of sight, she left and ran off to have an affair. When he asked how she was doing, no one could tell him her condition. He figured it out. 5 days in, when his nurse finally said, "Sir, your wife was never admitted." Crazy thing too is that their decision was made on a whim. While I, a 15-year-old, was spending the night with a friend. I came home and both of my parents were gone. I called the jails, hospitals, and relatives. My aunt injected herself into the situation just to feign confusion with me, all the while knowing what my mom was up to. She had a collaborator. That's next level cheating. Story 4. A family friend's husband was having an affair for 20+ years, and that woman knew the entire time about his family. He was at her ranch one time and was bucked off a horse and broke his neck. The affair partner called his wife to tell her and acted like everything about this situation was normal, and the wife had no reason to act all upset at the affair. Some people really just have no shame. Guy lived and made a complete recovery, left his mistress, and they stayed together since they were working on their relationship. He died a few years ago, and the wife finds out he never actually left his mistress, just lied. This is actually crazy to me. A family friend's husband cheated for like 6 years when she knew about his family. Also got bucked off a horse and hurt his neck. She called his wife. They broke up, and the wife stayed with him a little longer. He didn't die, but instead, she found out they didn't stop seeing each other and left him, and he lost his job. My ex-wife's grandmother was a mistress. She was married off at 14 during the Great Depression to an abusive old drunk. She met Jim in the 50s. He was already married. He bought her a house in the suburbs, and she was a kept woman for almost 40 years until he died. From what I hear, Jim was a real creep and would hit on my ex when she was a teen. Bad things happen to bad people. Story 5. I know a guy whose wife was cheating with his cousin, also married. He finds out and decides to have everyone over for supper. Halfway through supper, he looks his wife dead in the eyes and says, "I know you two are sleeping together," right in front of his affair partner and his wife too. It blew up and everyone got divorced. Affair partners never got together either. That's the funny thing about cheaters. They never end up together. Sometimes they do. My uncle did, after basically what was a scandalous wife swap thing, which was ridiculous. He was screwing the wife in a longtime friend situation with him, my aunt, and another couple. My aunt caught him with the wife of that couple, both divorced and remarried with the other spouse. My uncle stayed with the other woman, who had the same name as my aunt, until she died, and my aunt wound up divorcing the other woman's ex when he unsurprisingly turned out to be an abusive a-hole. It was all very bizarre and ridiculous, especially since everyone involved was supposedly upstanding and righteous Jehovah's Witnesses. I know of 2 couples that did a spouse swap. They were lifelong friends and still are to this day, like going on vacations together. My hypothesis is they were already swingers, then one day they all realized they'd be happier if they swapped. I found it pretty odd, but it seems to have worked for them, so who am I to judge? Cheaters should end up together since they don't really deserve anyone else. Story 6. I was 32. She was cheating on me with her ex for like 6 months before I found out. The way I found out was she called me crying hysterically, saying she killed him by accidentally running him over. I get all of her belongings from the police and find all the evidence on her laptop with them screwing. An argument over me was what caused the running over. Police ruled it accidental and she brags about it in bars to this day. She also ended up having a kid with a guy that had the same name as me and spells it exactly the same too. The way she ran him over was interesting too, purposefully at first, but he was alive under the tire and she had a sudden change of heart. She jacked the car up using the car jack, but it slipped as she was attempting to pull him out. It was raining, and the car tire then crushed his ribcage and lungs, finishing him off. So technically he got run over twice in the same night. She definitely murdered him, just could have driven off his body to get him out from under the car, but instead decided to jack up the car and drop it on his chest because he wasn't dead yet. The fact she still brags about it is her laughing that she got away with murder. If she felt remorse, she'd probably never talk about that again. My eyebrows were definitely raised reading that. Story 7. My dad cheated on my mom with a coworker. She suspected him of an affair but didn't know for sure until he didn't come home one night. I remember walking into the kitchen the next morning and asking my mom where he was. I was only 10 or 11 years old, by the way, and she said he didn't come home last night. So she called him at work, and he said he slept with a friend because he had too much to drink. My mom called the friend's wife, and she confirmed my dad was not there at all, and that's all my mom needed to know. It destroyed our family. My mom packed his stuff and left it by the door. She got addicted to prescription pills afterwards and tried to kill herself. She only lived because I found her and called 911. After that, she just left, took off and dumped me and my sister with my dad, who was ill-equipped to raise 2 teenagers. So he met this super B who was recently widowed. They got engaged, and before I knew it, I was living with her, and I had 6 stepbrothers and sisters. Things only got worse from there. I enlisted to get away from it all. Whole thing messed me and my sister up pretty bad. Growing up too quickly was awful for me too, friend. Maybe my experience is a little different because, as an only child, I was used as a weapon between both parents. But my mom's attempt hit me harder than any of the other stuff. To this day, I'm still deeply scarred by what she told the nurses at the ER in front of me. Just the most selfish, unhinged, poisonous, straight-faced, you probably understand more than anyone else that I've ever had to tell about it. However, realizing my parents were just two people, not the heroes or role models that I was supposed to imagine them as, prepared me to be grateful and have patience and compassion for everyone. It also got me in a great place professionally. Story 8. Girl said she was approved for some class in another really far city after her grades in college were too good. The boyfriend paid all her travel expenses and gave her his credit card for this trip to this specific event. When she arrives in another city, she calls, saying she won't come back and would live with this guy she met online and was chatting with for months. The boyfriend went crazy to cancel the credit card that he gave to her, found there never was any class, and she was almost expelled from college because her grades were terrible. She just traveled to meet the other guy and still made the boyfriend pay all her expenses. This happened about 15 years ago. I lost contact with her, but I remember she married the other guy. Had something similar happen to friends of friends. They decide they will be moving abroad. He is the breadwinner, and she is a teacher, so she goes over first to find a house, etc. He obviously pays for everything. A few months later, he quits his job, sells everything that is left, and gets on a plane to fly halfway across the world to his wife. Within hours of landing, she tells him she has met someone and wants a divorce. Coworker at my last job helped his girlfriend move from coast to coast. He paid for everything, thinking she was the girl for him. After they unloaded everything into her new apartment and returned the U-Haul, she broke up with him. His parents had to send him some money for a place to sleep that night and to get back home. Had to be the worst emotional night alone in a hotel more than 2,000 miles from anyone you're on speaking terms with. Story 9. High school sweetheart and I went off to college, different schools. While I was visiting, I was walking around the house to the front door. The window was open and I overheard her talking to another high school guy friend of mine who is in college with her about how she doesn't know how to tell me she cheated. He caught her with a friend of his and was forcing her to fess up before he did, so that broke us up, needless to say. She begged me to forgive her. About 3 months later, I relented and had her visit me at my college. We went out that night, food, drinks, and finally a house party. Before we were about to leave, I went up to a friend's room to grab a bag of cannabis from him. 15 minutes later, I came down, went out to the porch, looked to the left, and there she was making out with some random guy we hadn't even met before. She literally met him 2 minutes after I went upstairs. She cried all night. I was crying laughing that she had so little self-control. I ended up having her sleep on the couch and she went home before I woke up. Haven't spoken since. That was about 20 years ago. Story 10. I used to go to a comic shop, and the comic shop's owner knew all the gossip in the area. Nice dude. Remember all of his regulars and ask about you if he hasn't seen you in a while to check in on people. A lot of people in the area grew up with this shop, so he got stories. Anyway, he told us about this story from some years back about this regular who disappeared for a few months. Come back one day, and the shop owner asks him, "Hey man, haven't seen you in a while." Kind of like, "Where have you been?" The regular was like, "Oh, I've been getting divorced. I had to move it for the whole thing." So naturally, the shop owner asks, "Why are you divorcing your wife?" The regular caught his wife cheating. He had picked up a second part-time job as a pizza delivery man because he was trying to fund to take his wife on her dream vacation. All of the money he earned from that job was supposed to go into that vacation. He had been working on this job for like 6 months. It was a whole secret. She didn't know he was doing that for her because he was trying to surprise her. He was the pizza delivery man at the motel, where she was cheating on him. The dude she was cheating on him with answered the door with her right next to him. He apparently didn't even go back to the pizza place. He quit on the spot, went home, packed his stuff, and left town. I would have definitely kept the pizza. Story 11. Had everyone over for my birthday. Lots of drinks and laughs later. Most of my friends left and I told the remaining few they could either let themselves out or crash as I was going to bed. Woke up at 3 in the morning to get a drink of water and found my then boyfriend who lived with me and best friend of 10 years hooking up on my couch. That sucks that happened to you. I was in a similar situation. My best friend and girlfriend threw my 23rd birthday party. Best birthday party I'd ever had up to that point. I felt like I was in such a great place. Girlfriend and best friend who who got me so well and seemed to want the very best for me. Also, this was the first time my girlfriend ever met my sister and they hit it off immediately. I was so happy because that doesn't always happen with my sister. Anyway, we all eventually crash. Next morning, my girlfriend is lying next to me. She gives me a big kiss when we wake up because who gives a crap about morning breathing when life is so great? She was in school out of town, so she went away for the week as usual. In that week, my best friend broke. He confessed to me that she had come into his bedroom. The party was at his house in the middle of the night and woke him up by sucking his dick. He relented that he let it go on for a bit longer than it should have. I was devastated. I left at that moment and broke up with her over the phone. Epilogue, about 2 weeks later, I was hanging out with my best friend and some other folks. Drinks turned to words, words turned to insults that had nothing to do with my ex or what happened, mind you, resulting in a brutal fight on the floor of a dirty laundry room with all of our friends watching. Confused, no one knew what had happened yet, lol. Eventually, we both got up off the ground and yelled some affirmations to each other about the real reason for the fight. We agreed to take a walk together and talk about it. We walked for miles all the way back to his house and hung out the rest of the night. He apologized and all that jazz, and we're still friends. The end. Similar story here. Was at a house party, drank too much and decided to pass out in the backseat of my car, which was parked by the front door. Wake up in the morning and go looking for my then girlfriend and find her naked in bed with another guy because she couldn't find me. That sucked. Can't find your guy? Just find any guy. Story 12. Dating this girl a few years back, and I became really good friends with her brother just because he appreciated my help during a difficult time for their family. Their father had abruptly passed away. 2 years into the relationship, the brother contacts me and asks to meet up for coffee and a serious conversation. Apparently, he caught his own sister with another guy, a mutual friend of ours, and this stuff had been going on for like a year. As soon as he found out, I was told. Broke up with her. Still friends with her brother. Go figure. Not sure of the details, but I think my grandma, Mom's stepmom, was the one who told my dad about my mom cheating on him. Mom didn't speak to her dad and stepmom for several years after that, but they love my dad. Fun fact, the guy she was cheating with is now my stepdad. Maybe she told her brother to say all that. Maybe breaking up is hard for her. Story 13. 2 weeks ago, I sent a message to a mutual friend asking to borrow a router. He didn't answer, but no worries. He lives nearby. I'll just stop by and grab it. I pull up to his house and start heading down the driveway. He has a long country driveway, so it's a few seconds before I see my car. I drive a company vehicle during the day. Already there, my heart began to sink. But they are friends and business partners, maybe it's nothing. I got out of my van and looked up to see the other guy shirtless in his bedroom. At this point, my heart is down on my stomach and I'm visibly shaking. I go in and immediately head upstairs. He is alone, now clothed. I say, I came to borrow the router. Also, have you seen my wife? The car is here. He then proceeds to give the worst improv I've ever heard. Huh? No, she was here at some point though. Whatever, I knew she was there, I just wanted him to admit it. I go down, take the router, and head back to the van where I finally encounter my wife, topless, trying to sneak around the side of the house. And now here I am. I hope he kept the router. Story 14. I caught my ex thanks to Pokemon Go of all things. She mentioned Pokemon Go was using lots of her data. I explained that in her settings, she could see how much data an app was using. I proceeded to show her and prove to her it wasn't by pointing out Tinder was using much more data. It was sad, but also funny the way it went down. I've posted this before, but it's still funny to remember. I found out through Pokemon Go too. She asked me to take her phone when I walked to the store so I could hatch one of her 1K eggs. She got a Skype message from a guy that said, "Hi, I'm home. Are you free to send that pic?" Immediately suspicious, so I open it, and lo and behold, a record of texts going back around 3 weeks. Went to the store, got what I needed, went back to the house, packed my stuff in my suitcase, was visiting her house from out of state, and called one of my best friends who drove an hour to come and get me. I will never ever be able to express how much that meant to me. Sat her down as he was about to pull up to her house and told her I knew everything and that I was leaving and probably never coming back. Went to stay with my buddy for the rest of the trip. Muted her after she called me 10 times in the span of 5 minutes. Ended up calling her when I was on my way to the airport a few days later to just sell whatever of my crap was still at her place, and hung up before she had a chance to beg me to come back. The other day, I was at my boyfriend's house and we were watching a YouTube video on his phone. Suddenly, a banner notification pops up and I see 3 heart eye emojis before he quickly swipes it away and says, says, "Cool, I got a new Tinder match," and nonchalantly laughs. When he saw that I was upset by this, he insisted that he doesn't use the app and proceeded to attempt to delete his account. Unfortunately, an error message kept popping up that said can't process request or something. Part of me feels like I'm overreacting. The other part of me wants to puke. Story 15. After a week of visiting friends in London, England, I flew back to Canada. I was supposed to do something with another group of friends when I got back, but plans fell through, so I drove the 4 hours home to the apartment we shared. She expected me home at 6 p.m. I'd been up for 30 straight hours and got home at 6 a.m., wanting nothing more than to fall back into bed. There was an extra set of feet attached to some guy when I walked in. Same thing happened to me, but I'm a lady. It just blindsided me, and even though I know it's not my fault, it really messed me up. It was years ago, but we'd been together a while, and it's a big leap to invest in someone again when their true colors might take 6 years to emerge. While you were cheerfully building a life together and thinking they were solid, I hate him less for the betrayal than for how it changed me. I kind of lost my religion, the unquestioned belief that people are who they say they are. I missed the person I was. She expected good things and was usually right. Yeah, dude here, but mine destroyed me. Worked my ass off, built an amazing life for me, my wife, and our 2 little boys. Beautiful life, white picket fences and all that. Then I had to deal with 2 years of catching her cheating and trying to rebuild our family, and it happened again. I've been so jaded and just a totally different human being, from naive to the most skeptical person you'd ever meet. I've been single for 12 years now, and myself and everyone I know just assumed I'd be a bachelor till the day I died, and I was 100% on board with it. I'd never trust someone ever again. Just got engaged this spring. Shocked everyone, including myself. But I met the one person who was so amazing that I was more afraid of a life without her than commitment. So it can happen. Keep that in mind. Story 16. One of my former coworkers loaded in an SD card with a scanned project file on it. He put it into the conference room PC. We were treated to naked pics of his wife screwing another guy. We were just stunned. This was in a senior budgetary meeting with the outside accountants and auditors, and he was sitting right there and we were looking at his wife and another guy going at it. I reached over and shut the projector off. Nobody said anything. He got up and walked out and drove off in his car, left his phone and laptop sitting on the table. He wound up driving to his parents' house 3 states away. He was gone for a week. I was in the US and we had a company visiting from Europe to show us their home automation products they had made using our tech. One of their execs was projecting his laptop, logged into his One Home's control console, and started showing us the features. He was not changing anything like turning lights on and off because his wife was home from work now. "See?" he said as he switched to the driveway camera to show her car. He left it on the driveway cam while we chatted about some of the features and things, and then a car pulled into his driveway. "Oh look, you have a visitor." He briefly looked at the screen and said, "Oh, yes." And then he looked back as some dude got out of the car holding a bouquet of flowers and practically danced up to the door and just opened it up without knocking. We all froze for a second, and then he mumbled, "Please excuse me," unplugged his laptop from the projector and stepped out of the conference room. His colleague smoothly picked up where we left off, and we all just pretended nothing happened. It was tough. Similar story, we installed GPS units in all of the field operations trucks to track them back in the early 2000s when this wasn't all too common. It would also tell us how long trucks were idle or stopped in certain locations. We pull up the list in a presentation with about 20 employees, and there, one of the trucks is every day at the same location for hours. It's noticeable because it's the only truck bright red on the map display. One of the network guys leaves the room when he figures out the location on the map. Turns out one of the field ops guys was plowing the network guy's wife every day for 2 to 3 hours in the middle of the day when he was scheduled as maintenance. Story 17. Not me, my dad. He told me the story a few years back. So, some of my mom's family were visiting from out of town and they had planned a night at the bingo, which my dad couldn't attend because he was working 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. He finished work early and on his way home saw my babysitter on the street. "You are not with my name?" "No, your wife called me at around 8 p.m. saying she wasn't feeling well and that she would stay home." My dad drove home and tried the front door. Locked, no lights. He entered the house by the basement door, went upstairs, heard them a few feet away, my mom and her cousin. 2 years later, he almost left her with me in tow, but stayed so I could have a normal life. Most of the time, I wish he'd left because he wouldn't have worked 90 to 100 hours a week to avoid being home. and could have been happier. For those who are wondering, my mom had a long-time affair with her cousin, starting before she met my dad. She wasn't happy either, I think, but my dad was a good catch. Yes, I am sure he is my dad. We look very much the same. Yes, they are still together, and after a year of being angry, I decided to let go because their relationship has nothing to do with me. Just sad for both of them. Dude, very similar thing happened with my mom. My dad was born in the Philippines and would go once a year for 2 weeks or so for a golf tournament. I remember these 2 weeks every year would absolutely suck because I wasn't as close with my mom back then. Anyways, fast forward to when I was 10. My parents were in the process of splitting up and I found these weird baby pictures and a huge group family photo of a wedding on the family computer. I was the main user of the computer and I'm just sitting there not sure what to think. I show my mom. I put 2 and 2 together and we just sit there hugging each other crying for a solid hour. Turns out he has had a family with about 6 to 7 kids that were older and younger than me, with the oldest being 8 years older than me. Me and my mom were the second family. The person he had that family with, his first cousin. He's now married to that person, and over the years he's used my mom's credit to pay off his gambling debts, pay to bring his kids over to the States slowly, and even had the nerve to use my mom's savings to pay for his wedding in the Philippines while they were still married. Holy crap, my grandparents got married and had 5 children while they were living in the Philippines. They moved to America when my dad was 12. He was the oldest of 5. Decades later, we find out that my grandpa had a mistress on the side while they were still living in the Philippines, and he had 5 kids with her also. Those 5 kids, who were adults at that time, came to visit us at my grandparents' house about 10 years ago. It was awkward, but that's not even the weirdest part. He named the kids with the mistress in the Philippines the exact same names as the kids he had with my grandma. First and middle names. My dad was livid. It was a very uncomfortable evening. At least that proved he loved all of his kids. Story 18. Went home and my husband wasn't home, which was weird for him at 8 p.m. when an hour earlier he had told me he was going home. Had a gut feeling and went to one of our female friends, who he claimed was like a sister's, apartment. His truck was there. I knocked. No answer. Try the door. It's unlocked. Walk into the living room and nobody's there. Hear noises in the bedroom. Walk in and lo and behold, there they are. Tried to make it work over the next couple of months, but I couldn't get past it. I didn't even want him to touch me. Divorced 4 years ago. I think the worst part of these stories is when the door is unlocked. Story 19. After a night of trying to keep up with my ex and her coworkers drinking, I call it a night. They stopped talking a few minutes later and the dog scratched at the door. I let the dog in and saw them making out on the couch. I watched for 10 minutes before they noticed me. They were taking their clothes off by then, and he was touching her favorite spots, as he knew them well. No denying it by then. I am glad I knew. A tense conversation followed with the 2 of them. He left very drunk on a cold night. She got a ride to her aunt's place and begged me to go look for him in the cold. The dog is the hero of this story. Story 20. Me and my girlfriend were long distance, and she had a habit of going quiet sometimes. She'd been texting me for the last few weeks, but had made excuses not to come visit. I went to a party that my friend organized. I met a friend of his who told me he had a new girlfriend. I was surprised he hadn't mentioned her, so I asked who she was. This lady introduced me to my girlfriend. She'd told everyone that we broke up and had been dating my friend for about a month. She didn't bother to tell me. Yikes. I feel like that's a crisis averted. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.